the question was something along, sort of similar to the subtle stuff, where they were basically like saying, Ken, how integral can Ken's integral spirituality map be if it doesn't include things like the occult, namely what was identified as left hand and right hand paths. So the question is, how do they fit into your integral spirituality framework, if at all? As I understand it, the left hand and the right hand paths, this is a frame that's popular with a lot of sort of occult thinkers and theosophists and magicians and people like that. And I believe it has its root in tantric teaching. So it might be the case that these were some of the first tantric teachings that were brought over into the West, in the 19th century or so. But I guess a broader question, other than, how do these fit in, if at all, is there a place at all for this sort of thing? Is there maybe, when it comes to things like the occult, is there maybe a type of subtle energy magic that can be differentiated from magenta or red, magic, word magic, that type of thing? Or is this just sort of pre-trans fallacy all over the place?
Well, there's a pre-trans fallacy all over the place, but there is a degree of reality to these things. And what they involve are, and we'll get to this particularly when we talk about embodiment, but the upper left is a spectrum of consciousness, and the upper right is a spectrum of exterior material forms, but that means mass energy. And so there's a whole spectrum of mass energy in the upper right that corresponds with states of consciousness in the upper left. And these always go together. And I have written on that. And if we think about left hand as just using mind in the very broadest sense, sort of spectrum of mind, and then the upper right in the broadest sense is a spectrum of body. And so every mind has a body and every body has a mind. And so it's a radically non-dual version of this. But it does mean that any state of consciousness you're in is embodied. And again, we'll talk about that in a moment. But if you just look at the spectrum of energies in the upper right, first of all, you have the first 4 energies at the lowest level, starting with atoms and molecules. And these are the 4 energies recognized by physics: strong, weak, nuclear, electromagnetic, gravitational. But then the traditions maintain that as soon as life comes into being, so as soon as you have a cell, then not only does it have those 4 forces, around the cell itself is a small sphere of energy, life energy. It's usually called etheric energy. And that's an actual energy that's corresponding as you get more complex material capacities. And in the left-hand quadrants, you're getting a greater degree of consciousness. And so then as living cells get more complicated, and particularly by the time they get up to things like limbic system or even reptilian system, then you start to get another envelope of energy that surrounds the etheric, and that's sometimes called astral energy. Some of these names are pretty loopy, but astral energy. And in a sense, this is bioenergy 1 and bioenergy 2. And then as the mind emerges, as thought emerges, you actually get a thought field. There's a thought field that goes around the etheric and the astral. So you have the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the thought body. And as you keep going up, there's a psychic, subtle, causal energy. And each of these reach farther and farther, but they are holonic. They are surrounding each other. And so those are real energies, and they have real impacts. And one of the things that Tantra does, and one of the reasons that these energies are especially associated with Tantra, is that it will take bodily energies like sexual energy, and use the manipulation of that to bring forth the corresponding consciousness state. So instead of having to be celibate all your life in order to get into these conscious states, you can actually engage in a sexual activity. And if that's done with particular program, then that will help elicit a corresponding enlightened awareness. And so it's one of the reasons Tantra caught on so fast, which is it was fun as opposed to 20 years of celibacy. And so as that, in the midst of that, there was always a realization that these energies could be used in a positive way, but they also could be used in negative and destructive and self-promoting ways. And this started to give a division between sort of black magic and beneficial magic, sort of left hand and right hand paths. And as that came west, that division came with it. And there were a fair number of occultists that adopted the black magic aspect of it. Now, what you find in virtually any of those approaches is some degree of actual energy that is being tapped into, helping to generate a corresponding state of consciousness in the upper left, and then mixed in with enormous amounts of pre-trans factors, and especially magic, just infantile magic. And so you would start to get these almost voodoo kind of practices where I can, make an image out of you that represents you, and if I stick a pin in that image, you are actually hurt. I can give you the evil eye. I can transmit these negative energies on you and crush you. There's even, this distinction between being able to use these energies in positive ways and negative ways go all the way back to the earlier shamans. Shamans were often known more for the destruction they caused than for the healing they caused. And that's why they were such a powerful force in the tribe, that people were scared shitless of them. Not that they were worshiping them as some, great kind of God thing, although they could do that as well. But it often was, don't piss him off because he'll evil eye you to death, or thunder will strike you, or snakes will attack you, something horrible. You see in Aleister Crowley, people like that had clear capacities of moderately awakened awareness with a fair amount of control over the corresponding energies, and a confusion with magic, infantile magic, and practices that mixed all of those together. And that's what made occult such a peculiarly problematic practice. And so it wasn't something that you could just kind of automatically say, do this and this will be good, because you don't know the mixture that you're getting between, black magic and white magic. And that became a real issue. It also, on occasion, would get mixed up with alchemical notions and symbols. And again, that was a mixture of some fairly high symbolic, archetypal notions mixed in with some very, very crude, pre-rational magic notions. And we always have to be careful about those things. It was a kind of care that somebody like Carl Jung didn't always engage. He tended to read just the higher meanings into these things. And I can understand why, but you have to be careful about that, because it's not something that you want to get involved in yourself. I'm aware of those things. I've written about them in like small footnotes in certain places, but it's never something that I wanted to dwell on, particularly because, there are things to say about it, as I'm saying about it now, and I think these are useful, but it's not something that I would want included in this is the kinds of things that we think that are important for integral approaches, even though the integral approach does have room to explain that phenomena. And in essence, I just gave a version of that. But it's not something that we would want to give any indication that we're trying to promote or endorse.
Right, right.